Hello everybody. In a previous video we took a look at how we could use some speed trees in Unity to make our environments more lush, more interesting by painting trees into our landscape. In this video we're going to take a look at how we can set up some of our own custom modeled trees for our environments. And I've got this environment here with a lot of student work in it, all these individual houses in here. And what I did was take some of these trees from this work here, and I did a little bit of work on them in Maya so that we could bring these different trees, this deciduous tree and this conifer here, and really paint them into our landscape and make this environment more lush. So let's go ahead and go over into Maya and take a look at what I've prepared. So here we are in Maya, and here is one of the trees that we will be bringing into Unity. And we'll be bringing it in a way then that we can use it to really make our environment much more lush, really fill the environment with lots of vegetation, plants, and so on. But we'll be doing it in a manner that will be more efficient because we won't need to place these trees individually as individual models, but rather we'll be able to paint them into our landscape. In addition, because we're going to really be putting lots of these trees into that environment, we want to do whatever we can to make it run more efficiently. And one of those methods is by creating what are called LODs, or level of detail. So I'm going to select this mesh here, this tree, and I'm going to go to Display, Heads Up Display, Poly Count. And what I would like you to take note of is that this tree, this model that I currently have selected, is 804 faces. And what I have here in this group are 3 more trees that are hidden right now. But let's take a look at those. I'll unhide them, and I'm simply going to move them off to the side like this so that we can look at them side by side. And here they are. So more or less they should look very similar, with the key difference that actually they're of different polygon counts. Again, look at this number here. The first one is 804 polygons. The second one is 568. The third one is 379. And then finally our lowest polygon mesh tree here is 222. Now, this might not be the best example because where you're really going to get a savings with LODs is with much higher polygon meshes. So, for instance, you can really see what the savings would be if you had a mesh that was 10,000 polygons, and if you were able to reduce that considerably when the camera is further away from it. In fact, that's the reason why we use LODs, is because the further the camera is from the object, the less detail you really need on the model. So let's take a look though at what we can do to set these LODs up. So I'm going to go ahead and select all my trees, and I'm going to put them back at their origin. And I just want you to notice that I've already done the work to arrange this. I have 4 LODs here. They're numbered LOD 00, 01, 02, and 03. And I've nested them in this group here so that we have this single group with its contents in here being those 4 meshes. Another thing that I'd like to really stress is that I have already done things like delete the history. Actually, it looks like I have a little bit of history here, so let's go ahead and just do that now. Just delete that history. Not that that's too big of a deal, but it's always good practice to just keep things nice and neat before bringing it into Unity. The other thing I want to point out here is that, in fact, my translate and rotate data is all set to 0. My scale data is set to 1, 1, and 1 for all these models, these meshes. In other words, I have frozen the transforms on them. So let's go ahead and see how we can bring this into Unity and use it. So I'm going to go ahead and select my group with the 4 LODs in it. And I'm going to go to File, Export Selection, and we're going to be exporting it as an FBX. So I've already got it set from this drop down. I've already got it set to FBX. We'll go ahead and name this. Just give it a name and make sure you know where you're saving it to so you can quickly and easily find it. So I've created a folder here for my LODs, and I'm simply going to save this in there and export it. Okay, let's go ahead and go back over to Unity and see how we can set this tree up and use it in our scene. So here we are in Unity, and I'm going to select that FBX that I just exported. I have it right here. I'll simply drag it into, I created a folder, I guess I didn't create a folder for this. Let me go ahead and just create a folder for it in my project here. Okay, and we'll just drag this FBX into Unity, and that will bring this asset into our scene here, or actually into our project. Now we'll go ahead and drag the asset into our scene and start taking a look at it. I'm simply going to drag it into my hierarchy here, and then just press F to focus in on its location. Here it is. And what I want you to notice is that because of the structure, the way that I had organized it, pretty much most of the work is already done for me here. I have the group here with the 4 different LODs in here, and in fact, if you want to compare them, we can simply click on them. Here's LOD 00, 01, 02, and 03, with each one being lower polygon. Now if we select that top node, what you'll notice is that we have this LOD group here, and in fact we have these different bands of color for LOD 0, 1, 2, 3, and cold. These refer to at what point the model will swap out. In other words, at what point will we have our high resolution model swap out to the next lower resolution one, and then the next one, and then the next one. So for instance, notice where this camera is right here, this little blue icon of a camera, and if I zoom out, you'll notice that that camera starts moving to the right. And notice at this point we're still using LOD 0. If you look very carefully at the tree, you'll probably notice a little pop that happens when we go just a little bit further. There it goes. You can see there. If I go between these two, you'll see it changing from one to the other. Again, if we go even further out, you'll notice that at this point, LOD 2 will swap out. And finally, when we get this far back, LOD 3. Now if we go all the way over here where we can hardly see it, at a certain point the tree will entirely get culled out. In other words, Unity will not even attempt to render it at that point. We can also take a look at it this way. We can simply grab the camera here and just slide it to the right, and you can see that right here is when it switches, It'll switch to another LOD2 now, LOD3, and then once again it calls out when we're even further away. So this is all dependent on how far the asset is from the camera. Now, there are a couple other things maybe we could do to make this tree a little bit more functional. It does not have collision applied to it right now. So I'm going to go to Add Component, Physics, and we're going to add we'll add a Capsule Collider to it. I'm going to switch my camera to more of a orthographic camera here. And I'm going to just do some adjustments to the height of my collision, adjusting its placement. This way a player will not be able to walk through the trunk of this tree. Go ahead and just do a few more little adjustments. I think that should be adequate. So now that we have this set up, we can start placing it in our scene very easily. One thing I'm going to do first, though, is I'm going to actually take this, because we put a little work into it. We've worked on adding collision to it. So I'm actually going to drag this into my folder here. I could make a specific folder for prefabs. But I'm going to go ahead and drag it in there so that we can use this as an asset over and over and over again, and we won't have to set collision to each individual one. It'll use this prefab to do that. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and delete that tree, focus on my character here. You can see where I am in the environment here. And what you'll notice is then I can quickly and easily place these trees into my environment. If we play this, you'll see that the trees are here. I cannot run through them. They do have collision. And if we walk away from those trees, at a certain point you will notice that they will swap out to their different LODs. In fact, it happens right at this point right here. Now, clearly when you're working with LODs, you want to try to make that transition from one LOD to another a little more seamless than this. This one is a little bit difficult to do that with because of these hard edges on the mesh. It makes it a little bit more difficult to get that smooth transition. But you can see how that's working. So if I want trees in my environment, this prefab can work out quite nicely, and of course I can just individually place it anywhere in the environment that I want to use it. So if the exact placement of a specific tree is important, you can use it this way. But there is another way that we can use these trees, and let's take a look at that now. So I've got these hills in the background, and I'm going to go ahead and place some of these trees on this hillside over here. And what I'm going to do, because this is a terrain object, is select the terrain itself, come over here to the inspector, and I'm going to select this third icon, the one that has trees on it, and it is the Paint Trees button. I'll click on that, and we can start painting trees in our environment. Now, the only thing is that you'll notice we don't have any trees currently defined, so we don't have anything that we can actually paint in our environment right now. But if we come over here to Edit Trees, Add Tree, and then in this Add Tree pop-up here, we click on the Tree Prefab. Make sure that you pick the proper the proper icon here, because we've got a couple in here. We've got an FBX, another FBX, and then I have a prefab. This is the one that I want to select, the one that is a prefab here, because that's the one that has the collision on it that we set a little earlier. We'll go ahead and select that. Click on the Add button, and now we can easily paint these trees in our environment. And you can see how quickly and easily it is to paint them in there very, very thickly. In fact, I don't even think I will be able to navigate through that environment because this forest is just so dense. Let's escape out of there and see how we can fix that. It looks quite nice. Again, if I zoom out, you can see that it is changing its LODs. What I'm going to do is go back to my inspector, select the plant, and I'm going to hold down Control and erase these trees here. So what we really want to do is adjust the tree density, which is found here, tree density. Right now it's quite high. I'm going to go ahead and bring it all the way to the left. Even now, when I paint, you'll see that it still becomes quite thick, although it's a lot less thick now. It's going to be a little easier to navigate through this forest. Let me undo that. But the way that I'm actually going to use this is simply by just clicking and dropping them in, just like that. Let's put some on the hillside over here. You can add a little bit of randomization to the height, for example. And let's go ahead and just drop some of those trees on that hillside there. And maybe we'll put a grove over here as well. Okay, let's take a look at that. So, the trees look nice. Come over here, take a look at what they look like over on the hillside. They look good. And we've got the collision set up for them. This can be a really great way to really fill your landscape and make it look really, really nice. And again, don't forget that these are actually using LODs. So as we get closer to them, they will swap out for their higher resolution meshes. So here we are back in Maya. I'm going to go ahead and hide this example that we just looked at, and I have yet another example to show you, and that is of a pine tree. Once again, we have some different variations of it that will swap out depending on how close we are to the tree. Here's what they look like. And once again, we can select them and look at their polygon count. This one here is 53 faces, 34 faces, and then this one is actually only 3 faces. How is it that this one is only 3 faces? Well, if we actually look at it, I'm going to turn off textures. You'll notice that it is in fact just 3 polygon planes, and it has a texture on it with transparency. So because it has these intersecting planes like this, we can still rotate around it and it'll look good, and it'll look more like it's a full 3-dimensional form. Anyway, let's go ahead and put those back to their origin. And we'll export out this tree as well and try it out. So I've exported out the pine tree also as an FBX, just like we did with this deciduous tree here. Let's go ahead and bring it in. I'm going to just drag my FBX into Unity here. One thing I should note about these trees that we were working with before, the textures just worked because they're actually using currently the same texture as all of the objects in this environment here. And because the texture was already, and the material was already set up in Unity, I didn't have to do anything with that material there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take this tree and I'm going to just drag it into my hierarchy, and we'll go ahead and focus on it. Here it is. Once again, you'll notice that it recognized it as a group with LODs because I had it arranged that way, and also because of my naming convention here. Now notice that here's the LOD 00. This is the highest resolution pine tree we have here. Here's the next version of it, and then here is the third version, which currently is not really set up to work. But if you remember, I was saying that it is consisting of 3 overlapping polygon planes. So we're going to need to fix this one. The other 2 work because they also are using the same texture and material as everything else in my scene here. So let's take a quick look at the texture that this LOD is going to use, this very low polygon LOD. So I'm simply going to switch over to Photoshop. This is the texture. It's just an image of the tree. But what you should notice is that if I go to channels, we do have an alpha channel here. Here it is here. And the alpha channel, if we look at just it, for example, just hide these other channels here. The areas that are white will be opaque. The areas that are black will be masked out. In other words, they'll be transparent. So that's how this texture works. We'll go back to Unity now. And I'll go ahead and bring that texture into my scene here. Here is my texture. And what we'll do is we'll create a material. Name it. And apply that texture to the albedo here. Here's my texture. And we'll go ahead and apply it to our tree. So I'll select the tree, come over here to the materials. We'll come over here to the materials and find that material that we just created. Here it is, pine tree. And here it is applied. The only problem is we don't currently have the transparency working on it. And also it appears that we have some back face culling happening here. So let's see what we can do to fix that. I'm going to select my material, and what we'll do is we will change the type of shader that it is. Actually, what we'll do is we'll change the rendering mode of the shader. So here's the rendering mode. It's currently set to opaque. You'll notice that we have some different options here. We have cutout, fade, and transparent. Now that we have the cutout applied to it, you can see that it's working, although we still have the back face culling. But otherwise it's working well. So, okay, so currently it's working, except that we are getting this back-faced culling. In fact, we do need to go to the, for the material itself, we do need to go to the shader type. So we'll go to its drop-down, sprites, and we'll select the default. Select the default sprite. And now, if we select that LOD2, you'll see that it's here, and in fact, it's working quite nicely. You can see it appears to have a 3-dimensional form, even though in all actuality, it's just 3 polygon planes intersecting one another. So let's test it out and see how well our LODs will work. here's the highest resolution tree. We'll go ahead and zoom out, and right about here is when it's going to switch over to one of the other LODs, the LOD 01, and then right about here it's going to switch over to our LOD 2. Remember that that is just consisting of 3 intersecting polygon planes. Remember that you can also grab the camera here and just scrub, and you can check and see what your different states look like with your LODs. Now, one other thing before we finish this up, just like the previous example, we'll go ahead and click on Add Component, and we'll go ahead and add, under the physics, a Capsule Collider. Do some adjustments as far as its placement on the y-axis, perhaps adjust its radius and its height, and perhaps something like that. I'm going to go ahead and switch this to a more isometric view here so that we can more easily fine-tune it, but I think that that should be good for its collision. And now this tree is set up and ready to be used, so I'm going to go ahead and also drag it into my hierarchy so that we can use it as an original prefab. Now that we're done with that, I'll go ahead and delete that tree and perhaps return over here to our character. We can try out a couple of these prefabs just to see how it's working. Put one here, put one there. We'll go ahead and play. Here they are. You can see that the collision is working. And if we run away from them, we will see at a certain point, right there in fact, you can see that it pops from one LOD state to the other. If we go even further, it'll swap over to its other. In fact, it looks like it did it right about here. Now, through fine-tuning and working with it a little bit more, perhaps we could make the transition from one LOD to another a little less obvious. But still, I would say that these work pretty well. Let's go ahead and escape out of here. I'm going to go ahead and delete those two. And we'll go ahead and create a brush for this one as well, and then paint it in our environment. Once again, I'm going to select my terrain. I'm going to go to Edit Trees, Add Tree. We'll go ahead and go to the tree prefab, find the tree. Find our prefab here. Here it is here. I'll go ahead and select it and add it. So now we can easily drop in these trees, and once again you can see that you can put them in very, very thickly. Even though I have the density down very low, if I just paint in here, you'll see that they come in very thick. Test that out. If I do a stroke, that is. If I do a stroke, then they end up coming in very thick, but it looks nice. Can't really go through it. It's impenetrable. Remember that if you want to erase trees, you can do that as well by holding down Control, select your tree here under the trees, and then paint. That way we don't accidentally paint away our deciduous trees there. And we'll go ahead and drop some of these in here into our environment as well. Actually, I'll drop it right about there. There we go. Let's go ahead and check it out, see how it looks. And it looks pretty nice. So in conclusion, in this video, we took a look at how to work with LODs, in other words, level of detail. Remember that LODs are a great way to make your levels run more efficiently because you don't need to, if a model is far away from the camera, you don't need to have that high resolution. You only need to have that high resolution model perhaps when the camera is very close to the object itself. And then we also looked at how we could make our own custom trees, which then will allow us to really populate our landscape with lots of lush, interesting vegetation. So I hope that this video has been informative for you, and thank you for watching.